tried to undo the corruption and the autocratic capture in their systems. So we're running into this conflict between the human rights advocates who say the people who were in those jobs deserve due process, and you can't violate the rule of law by breaking the law and firing them. I mean, think about the contrast with that and Slaughter, for example, right? The good news is that in the U.S. with Slaughter, if we can get a president in who is interested in actually restoring expertise and bipartisan participation in multi-board panels and stuff like that, a new president can do it, no trouble. Maybe that's good, right? So in Hungary, what they're confronting is this wall of opposition now. And I think Peter Magyar is going to go through and fire them and make them sue. But it's not a very elegant solution. The problem is there aren't very many elegant solutions. Just to say one last thing, what Orban did was so the president could have been impeached by the parliament. They changed the law last December to make that impossible. The people who are on the Constitutional Court, the current president, whose term, by the way, lasts till 2037, was just installed last year as the result of an ad hominem law that allowed him to go straight from heading the public prosecution into the court when that move had been barred by law before. So one of the other ideas is to go through and unravel all the ad hominem, ad personam, laws that were constructed in order to put specific Orban loyalists into these jobs. The other thing is to reduce the length of terms of these offices, but in order for it to be effective, it has to apply to the current occupants. And then we get into a situation like we're talking about with the Supreme Court here, circling back to packed court, right, as a theme. If you've got institutions that are packed, how do you unpack them? What's going to happen is that there will be challenges like the ones we're seeing in Hungary. You can't fire the judges because they have life tenure. You can't limit their terms because they weren't limited before. You have to, if you're thinking about putting term limits on, I forget what the estimates are. I think, Kate, you'll remember more than I, but it would take, 20 years before you had a meaningful rotation with the current occupants
something like that, yeah.
on the bench.
18 to 24 or something.
Yeah, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So when you have these transitions, you need immediate change. And just to say one last thing, I mean, I think our court's been packed, since Trump won, at least, since he got 3 seats on the court. And what happened, and you've covered this on the pod in great detail, when you have a packed court, and when you have these institutions, and then you get an election that flips things, these are called in the political science literature U-turns, right? So you're a democracy, you go down into an autocratic capture, then you try to make a U-turn back up into democracy. There is not a single case in the political science literature of any country that's made a successful U-turn that lasted longer than 5 years. Going back, I think, 50 years now, okay? Why is that? It's this problem, that if you've got autocratic capture of institutions, those institutions veto what the new government does, so that the new government doesn't look effective, they lose support, and because these autocrats still have supporters, they come back at the next election. Think of SCOTUS. What did they veto of Biden's initiatives? All the things that would have made Biden look instantly effective. They let slide everything that had long-term consequences. But if you just think about it this way, just student loans is like the first example that comes to mind. But there were things Biden was trying to do to achieve immediate results. That's where the court swept in and said, no, you can't do it. So when Biden was going to be up for re-election, or when Harris replaced him, the argument was, what did they do with 4 years? And that was largely the fault of the packed court. Okay, that's happening in Poland, where the packed Constitutional Tribunal and the president as a veto player have prevented the new pro-democratic government from achieving the change that they promised. Peter Magyar knows those cases, right? And so he's come in, hit the ground running, and he's just going to try to fire all the veto players. And now you've got human rights groups. Anyway, don't get me started on this. I had a conversation with the leader of one of them yesterday, and I said, look, what about democracy? He said, that's somebody else's lane. We just do human rights. Okay, so unless you fire or really get rid of the roadblocks left over from autocratic capture, what you get is the re-election of Trump, the re-election of peace, the re-election of Bolsonaro's son in Brazil. We can talk about that one. So they're all on that track to have one good election and then go back to the old system because these autocratic institutions are captured.